Just pour the coffee, Grandpa. The adults are working. The young SEAL operator tossed the words over his shoulder without even looking, brushing off 77-year-old Elias Ward as if the man were nothing more than background noise. Inside the secure briefing room at Redstone Bay Naval Facility, 12 members of a SEAL platoon were gathering for a classified mission brief. Elias, wearing a plain polo and khakis, moved quietly between chairs with a pot of coffee in hand, carrying himself with the practiced subtlety of someone who'd spent years blending into the edges of a room. The young operator, Ryan Cole, 26 years old, already through 2 deployments, carried the kind of unshakable confidence that comes from surviving gunfights and believing that makes you untouchable. To him, Elias was just another aging civilian worker handling the forgettable chores that kept the place running. If you think respect shouldn't require someone to earn it first, drop honor below. Elias didn't react to the slight. He just kept pouring, his steady, weathered hands showing no sign of irritation. For 3 years he'd been serving coffee in these rooms, a quiet figure most operators barely noticed. No one ever asked who he was. His badge marked him as civilian support with clearance to attend these sessions, but not to contribute. He always arrived ahead of the teams, set everything up, kept the mugs full, and cleaned the room after planning dragged late into the night. To most, he was nothing but wallpaper. Easy to overlook, easier to ignore. A few SEALs treated him decently, most didn't bother. And Ryan belonged to the smaller, louder group who openly dismissed him. Young men convinced their experience outranked anything an old man carrying coffee could ever know. The briefing pressed on. Their platoon commander, Lt. Comdr Mason Briggs, a 15-year veteran, began outlining a complicated direct action operation. Intel pointed to a high-value target deep inside restricted territory. The plan required a helo insertion followed by a long, punishing movement to the objective. Ryan immediately started challenging parts of it. "Sir, that insertion point is too far from target. We're adding risk without gaining anything. We should get in closer, strike fast, and get out before they can react." Briggs held his tone steady. "Ryan, the closer insertion points are watched. Enemy observation posts cover all approach routes." But Ryan only doubled down. "With respect, sir, we're SEALs. Closer insertion is what we do. The long walk just gives them more time to find us." Operators shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew Ryan's reputation. He'd earned 2 Bronze Stars, one for charging through fire to pull a teammate out. Brave? Absolutely. Skilled? Without question. But he was also young and increasingly convinced that his combat record meant he understood tactics better than his chain of command. The debate escalated as Ryan pushed for aggression and Briggs insisted on caution. The tension in the room rose as operators quietly took sides. Then, from the far corner, a quiet voice cut through the noise. "The lieutenant commander's right. The insertion point is the safest option." Heads snapped toward Elias, the man pouring coffee. Ryan's expression twisted in annoyance. "Did anyone ask you to speak?" Elias met his stare calmly. "No, but the area you're discussing is one I know well. The commander's judgment is correct. Move any closer and you'll be spotted. The observation grid there is far deeper than the intel packet suggests." Ryan actually laughed. "Oh, really? And you figured that out while filling mugs?" He turned to Briggs. "Sir, we're seriously entertaining tactical input from a civilian who hands out refreshments." Briggs didn't reply. He was studying Elias with an expression Ryan couldn't decipher. "Mr. Ward, you're familiar with that region?" Elias answered with a simple nod. "Yes, I operated there in 71 and 72. The terrain's hardly changed. The local networks still function the same way. The route you've chosen uses cover in ways the enemy still doesn't anticipate. Ryan's approach would only work if their observation posts were where the brief says they are. They're not. They're 300 meters southwest, right where your close insertion would walk straight into their line of sight. Ryan stood abruptly, frustration boiling over. You worked there in 1971? So you were in the Corridon Highlands half a century ago doing, what, support tasks? And that's somehow relevant to modern special operations. Sir, this is absurd. We can't plan missions based on 50-year-old memories from support staff who— Ryan, sit down. Briggs's voice hit like a hammer. Ryan sat, stunned. Briggs looked around the room. Does anyone here know who Elias Ward is? Silence. No one did. The old man with the coffee pot was just that. An old man with a coffee pot. Briggs stepped over to Elias, straightened his posture, and rendered a crisp salute. Elias returned it without hesitation, instinct overriding preference. The entire room erupted in shock. Commanders didn't salute civilian support staff. They saluted officers or legends. Gentlemen, Briggs said, allow me to introduce someone you should have recognized the moment he walked in. This is Elias Ward, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, 3 combat tours, operated in Vietnam with SEAL Team 1, conducted missions so classified they're still sealed. Official records list him as KIA in Laos in '71 as part of a special access program that still doesn't officially exist. Every operator involved in that mission was listed as dead to protect operational secrecy. His call sign was Shadewolf 9. Whispered stories traveled through the community about Shadewolf 9, a ghost operator whose mission shaped wars but were erased from history. Operators went pale. Ryan felt horror rising in his throat as he realized he hadn't just disrespected an elderly contractor. He'd belittled one of the most feared and respected SEALs to ever operate. Master Chief? I didn't know. Elias raised a hand. You couldn't have known, son. That's the whole point. Briggs turned back to him. Master Chief, with respect, you shouldn't be serving coffee. You should be in these planning sessions. Elias hesitated. Commander, these teams are the best trained warriors in history. I'm just here to stay close to the community. But the senior chief stepped forward. Sir, with respect, we don't have the luxury of ignoring wisdom that prevents casualties. Elias looked at the young faces around him. Operators hungry to learn. Operators who deserved every possible advantage. And finally, he nodded. For the next 2 hours, he shared knowledge that no briefing book had ever included. Terrain patterns, cultural nuances, observation tactics the enemy had used for generations. Ryan apologized afterward, humbled, finally seeing how his arrogance had created blind spots that nearly cost the team. And when he asked Elias to mentor him, Elias agreed, cautioning him that humility wasn't just moral, it was tactical. Over time, Ryan transformed into a leader who listened before speaking, sought knowledge from every direction, and taught his own students the lesson he learned that day. Never underestimate the quiet one in the room. Elias continued advising until age 84, shaping more than 200 missions with insight forged in places most SEALs only heard about in rumors. When he finally retired for good, S. Command honored him with a plaque naming him Shade Wolf 9, forever a SEAL. And across the community, the story of the old coffee man, told on Major Tom's tales, became a reminder that legends don't always announce themselves, and the person you overlook might be the one who keeps you alive. Otacumdar Briggs asked, Elias, you know that operational region? And Elias gave a single nod. I do. I worked that area in '71 and '72. The land hasn't shifted much, and the locals still watch everything that moves. He explained that the route Briggs had selected used the natural folds of the terrain to mask movement. It took longer, but tactically it was far safer. The aggressive path Ryan kept pushing would only succeed if the enemy observation posts sat exactly where the intel packet claimed, but they didn't. They never had. Those posts were 300 meters southwest, positioned so they could see any close insertion the moment it began. Ryan shot to his feet, anger spilling over. "So you operated there in 1971? You're telling me you were running around over 50 years ago in the Corridon Highlands, probably doing who knows what, and somehow that's supposed to apply to modern special operations?" He turned toward Briggs again. "Sir, this is absurd. We can't base our planning on half-century-old memories from support personnel who—" "Ryan, sit down, now." Briggs' voice snapped the room to attention. Ryan dropped back into his seat, confused and fuming. Briggs scanned the men. "Does anyone here actually know who Elias Ward is?" Silence. Not a single operator answered. To them, the old man with the coffee pot was just that. An old man with a coffee pot. Briggs walked to Elias, stopped, stood at attention, and delivered a sharp, formal salute. Elias returned it immediately, muscle memory overriding his desire to stay unnoticed. The room erupted into stunned disbelief. Commanders didn't salute civilian support staff. That kind of respect was reserved for officers or living legends. Ryan stared, trying to figure out what was happening. Briggs held the salute, then finally lowered his hand. "Gentlemen," he said, voice tight with respect and disappointment. "Meet someone you should have recognized the moment he stepped in here." He gestured to Elias. "This is Elias Ward, Master Chief Petty Officer, retired, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, deployed to the Corridon Highlands in '68 with SEAL Team 1, 3 combat tours, ran missions so sensitive they're still classified. After that, he was pulled into a special access program that officially doesn't exist. He carried out black operations through the 70s and early 80s. His official record lists him as killed in action in Valor Province in '71. That was never corrected because the mission required every operator involved to be declared dead to protect operational secrecy. His call sign was Shadewolf 9. A hush fell over the room. Shadewolf 9, a name whispered through SEAL, training like a ghost story, passed from instructor to student. A man rumored to have carried out operations so deep behind enemy lines there was no rescue, no backup, no acknowledgement if something went wrong. The kind of missions that altered conflicts but were erased from the books. The platoon had all heard stories about a shadow team that slipped into hostile territory and removed targets that shaped entire strategies. Operations executed with such precision, the enemy never understood what had happened. They always assumed the tales were exaggerated. Looking at the quiet old man by the coffee table, they realized the stories were true. They'd always assumed those stories were blown out of proportion, the kind of myths that gather around special operations over time. But staring at the quiet old man holding a coffee pot, they understood every legend had been real. Ryan went pale. The swagger draining from him, replaced with the sick realization of how painfully wrong he'd been. "Sir, I didn't. How was I supposed to know?" Elias answered with soft patience, without a hint of resentment. "You couldn't have known, son. That's exactly the point. I'm here because I wanted a way to stay connected after retirement. Pouring coffee keeps me close to the community I care about. I don't need a grand role. This is enough for me." Briggs shook his head firmly. "Elias, with all due respect, it does matter. You have experience this team can't afford to ignore. You shouldn't be over here filling mugs. you should be helping shape the mission. Your insight into that region alone could save lives." Elias paused, then sighed. "Commander, I've been sitting in these rooms for 3 years. I've listened to dozens of plans. Most of them were damn near perfect. Your operators are the best trained and best equipped special operations force on the planet. They don't need an old man second-guessing them." Briggs pressed harder. "But when you do see something, when you recognize a flaw, you have to speak up. What if I'd approved Ryan's plan without you? What if we inserted close and got burned exactly the way you warned?" Elias lifted a shoulder. "Then you'd adapt, like SEALs always do. Or you'd learn from the mistake. Some lessons come gently, others don't." Senior Chief Nolan Vega stepped forward, his tone respectful but unyielding. "Master Chief, with respect, we can't afford the kind of lessons that cost lives, not in this job. Failure isn't theoretical. It's fatal. If you know something that keeps us breathing, we need it. Pride can wait." Elias looked around at the young operators watching him, faces full of respect, curiosity, and hunger for knowledge. Good men, skilled men, men who deserved every edge he could give them. He'd spent years staying small, trying not to intrude. Maybe that had been a mistake. Maybe silence wasn't humility. It was surrender. Finally, he exhaled. "All right, let me walk you through that region. Not just what I remember from 71, but what I've kept up with since. I may not be out there anymore, but I stay current. The enemy's adjusted their network over time, but the fundamentals haven't changed. They still use the terrain and the locals the same way. Understand that pattern, and you can move through their backyard like a ghost. Ignore it, and you'll get spotted within hours." For the next 2 hours, Elias poured out everything no manual could teach, details earned through sweat, fear, and first-hand experience. Cultural habits only long-term operators ever understand. Terrain behavior no satellite brief could capture. The operators scribbled furiously. When the briefing finally ended, Ryan approached him, humility replacing his earlier edge. "Master Chief, I owe you an apology. What I said was ignorant and disrespectful. I'm sorry." Elias studied him carefully, seeing not just skill, but the dangerous confidence that could get good people killed. "Ryan, you're a strong operator. Your record proves that. But you need humility, not just because it's a virtue, but because arrogance blinds you, and blind spots kill teams. You assumed you knew everything that mattered. You brushed off someone who might have had something useful to say. That could have put all of you in a bad place. Don't repeat that mistake." Ryan nodded earnestly. "Master Chief, would you be willing to mentor me? I clearly need to learn more than how to fight." Elias smiled softly. "You've already got excellent mentors. Your commander's sharp, and Senior Chief Vega's forgotten more about this work than most men ever learn. Listen to them, but yes, when it matters, I'll share what I know." Briggs returned then, decisive. "Elias, this is official. I'm requesting you be reassigned from support staff to Senior Tactical Advisor. You'll be part of planning for every platoon operation. We need your expertise baked into our process." Elias tried to protest, but Briggs cut him off. "This isn't charity. This isn't a sentimental gesture. This is operational necessity. You have knowledge that saves lives. Using that knowledge isn't us doing you a favor, it's us doing our duty." Briggs finished with a firm, "It's an obligation we owe our operators." And Elias finally relented. On one condition, he would still serve coffee at the briefings. "Keeps me grounded," he said with a small smile. "Besides, my coffee's good." The platoon soon formed a new ritual. At the start of every briefing, the commander would call the room to attention and formally honor Elias, not to make a spectacle of him, but to remind everyone that mastery doesn't always arrive in obvious packaging, that respect should precede judgment, and that assumptions can blind you to the expertise standing right beside you. Ryan quickly became one of Elias's most devoted learners. He learned how to temper raw aggression with patience, how to listen instead of charge ahead, how to recognize that being the most lethal operator didn't automatically make him the wisest one in the room. Years later, after Ryan had risen to senior chief and was shaping the next generation of SEALs, he told Elias's story to his students. "The greatest lesson I ever learned," he would say, "came from a man I nearly dismissed as irrelevant. I almost missed learning from one of the finest operators in SEAL history because I judged him by his age and his job instead of by his knowledge. Don't repeat my mistake. Listen to everyone, learn from everyone, respect everyone until they prove otherwise, and even then, treat them with professionalism. You never know who you're talking to." Elias continued serving as senior tactical advisor until age finally pushed him into full retirement at 84. By then, he'd quietly shaped over 200 successful missions. His insight had prevented countless casualties and operational failures. The men who served with him understood they were learning from someone who bridged the earliest era of naval special warfare, a man who had operated in conditions and against adversaries modern operators rarely encountered. When Elias finally stepped away, Naval Special Warfare Command held a ceremony attended by hundreds of current and former SEALs. The commander presented him with a plaque that read, "Shade Wolf 9, Master Chief Elias Ward, forever a SEAL." As for the young operator who once brushed him off as the coffee guy, he went on to have a distinguished career of his own. He never forgot the sting of realizing how wrong he'd been, but even more, he never forgot Elias's grace, the patience, the humility, the willingness to teach rather than belittle. That lesson, that true professionals don't need to broadcast their greatness, that quiet competence outshines arrogance, shaped every aspect of Ryan's leadership. He became known as the instructor who listened first, who sought out insight from every level, who treated every person with respect regardless of rank. Elias's story spread through the special operations world and far beyond. It became a touchstone lesson about assumptions, humility, and the priceless value of institutional memory. Instructors at Bud S used it to deflate overconfidence. Leadership courses used it to highlight the danger of bias. Veterans groups used it to remind people that service doesn't vanish when the uniform comes off, and that capability doesn't diminish just because someone ages. In every context, the message echoed, never dismiss someone because of how they appear. You have no idea who stands in front of you. And if you believe respect should begin before it's earned, that age carries wisdom rather than irrelevance, and that real expertise doesn't need to shout, subscribe to Major Tom's tales. We share stories honoring those who served quietly, who were overlooked and later vindicated, who remind us that greatness is often hidden in unexpected places. Pass on Elias's story to someone who needs a lesson in humility. Comment with a moment when you discovered that someone you underestimated carried extraordinary knowledge. These stories preserve a truth people forget too easily. The one pouring the coffee might be the most capable person in the room. Legends walk among us unrecognized, and our failure to notice never makes them any less real. Hit that subscribe button to Major Tom's Tales and tell me where you're watching from.